Morning. Morning. My name is Jo Walter, and I'd like to thank Ted George for having given the blessing to this day. And we'd like to express our appreciation with a gift. Being in this place for this first big gathering of folks of the Kitsap 99 is such a gift to us. To be in a place where folks have known for many years the importance of taking care of each other, taking care of their community, is a place where we can get the spiritual grounding that we need in order to begin this work in Kitsap County. So we'd like to offer you a gift. It is a photograph with the words inscribed: "The Kitsap 99% thanks the Port Gamble Squam tribes for their gracious welcome and extraordinary hospitality, March 24th, 2012. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Martha Shelburne of the First United Methodist Church in Bremerton, who has some words of gratitude to share with us.
Thank you, Jo, and thank you. I have been given the honor of saying how grateful we are to be in this very place, this land that is holy. And I want to say thank you on behalf of every one of us here to the Squam tribe for inviting us to this special place for a very important gathering. Several years ago, I was attending a conference in Victoria, British Columbia, and at the beginning of every proceeding, which was formal, whether it was a greeting by the mayor or whatever the breakout session was, those presiding would initiate their statements with a message of thanks to the Native peoples for inviting us to their land. And I am encouraged that this is a tradition, a recognition that I am beginning to see more and more. When I was talking with Jo about this event, I inquired as to whether or not I should wear a clerical robe, and she replied that it was the intent that no one would stand out or be a star. And I agree, and yet this is the intrinsic irony as to why we are gathered here, for all the carbon that is the very basis of our form of life was forged in the explosion of stars in the creation of the universe. We are all literally formed of stardust. Do you know that we are all stars? And I believe with all my heart that it will be by you that this country will come to know the directions to guide them. You are beautiful stars. You oppose that something in the human condition that often would tend to justify a position of privilege, even when that privilege is unwarranted or abused. Shining stars, I think we here today are here because we agree with Martin Luther King Jr. in believing that the arc of the moral universe is long, but that it bends towards justice. We here today are not only to occupy, but to add our slight mass toward bending our nation towards its promise. And I believe we will. I believe that you are here because of the principality of justice and compassion and universal opportunity for all the stars ever born. Equality for all will be brought about by people who know that each one of us are stars of this universe, and when we level the playing field, we shine so bright with justice and compassion right now I've asked some dear friends I've just met to pass out some stars so we can remember that we are stardust. Please wear your stars, receive them, and remind us of what we are made of. Your starlight, in which shines here today, I believe will be made possible, that we will shine so bright nothing can hide that light. So thank you for all you are and for all you're doing, and thank you, Tribe, for being so gracious and shining your stars so bright.
When everyone has had a chance to put a star on your neighbor, check with your neighbor, make sure they've got a star. We don't want anyone to leave here this morning without knowing that they've been lit up by someone, a neighbor, someone next to them. So I'd like to introduce Elisabeth Bondy. She lives in Bremerton and is a friend, a former librarian who isn't online, but she's totally tuned in and will come up now to share a little bit with us. And let's welcome her.
I'm excited to be able to introduce David Korten as one of our speakers today. I have been a subscriber to Yes magazine, I think almost from the beginning. I have given subscriptions to graduating high school students, and often families keep subscribing because it's such a wonderful magazine. I own some of his books, I have read some, and I'm right now involved in looking at this one, this agenda for a new economy. It says from phantom wealth to real wealth, and phantom wealth is Wall Street and the real wealth is Main Street. And then on top it says why Wall Street can be fixed and how to replace it. Very ambitious. And you don't hear any establishment economists talking like that. They wouldn't be allowed to because it would be very inconvenient truth. We have to change, and who wants to? On the back of the book, it gives one of the voices where John Kavanaugh is saying, no one should be surprised that David Korten is the first great thinker to assemble a detailed roadmap for the new economy where people, the planet, and communities come first. So it's a pleasure to look at it. I have it on my coffee table, and every so often I read a little chapter and try to absorb it. Yes magazine is published by the Positive Futures Network, and David is chairman of the board. And it's a wonderful magazine if you want to live I found out I had 5 minutes. I thought I might have 15, so I have to look back to my script. Yeah, I crossed off and scribbled. David earned his MBA and doctoral degrees at the Stanford School of Business. He was active in U.S. academia several years, and then did his periodic duty going as a captain in the Air Force to Vietnam War. And then he decided to go to Southeast Asia, work with the Ford Foundation and US aid agencies to stamp out poverty and environmental destruction. Well, he began to realize that their models were not good for what they were trying to do, and nobody wanted to change. So he left the official agencies and stayed there to work with non-governmental organizations to pursue his goal. And all of a sudden he realized this is a worldwide problem, and the US has it too. So he came back in 1952 and worked for his goals here. He founded several organizations to accomplish the goal. One is called the People-Centered Development Forum, and then there are quite a few others. It's too long to mention here, and I hope he can say more about his life involvement in all these causes, because he didn't give me enough time.
Thank you, Elisabeth. Many of you don't know, she is a legend in our region for her activism and leadership. And you know, you're 74. You're 94. I'm only 74, and I want you to know you're quite an inspiration to us young folks. Well, it's wonderful to be here with the active leading edge of Kitsap County. And I think it's particularly fitting that we meet in this setting, because our work really does begin with a spiritual awakening and a recognition that we are, in fact, all people of the earth. And it is our indigenous brothers and sisters who are our living memory, the wisdom keepers of our human tribe, from which we have so much to learn as the rest of us rediscover and return to our roots and rebuild our communities and reestablish our connection to Earth. So we're here to discuss important issues, generate ideas, enjoy each other's companies, learn from one another, and create a local focal point for our contribution to turning the human course. Now, the 2008 financial crash, which of course was the product of reckless Wall Street excess, was a national wake-up call. It stripped tens of millions of honest, hard-working, and talented Americans of their jobs, homes, their retirement assets, and plunged them into poverty and despair. And as bad as conditions are for white people, they are far worse for people of color, and for young people just entering the labor force, but entering already in debt bondage to Wall Street banks for their education. When I was growing up, we were a middle-class nation and the envy of the world. Wall Street has reduced us to a nation of debt slaves. Poverty is near a 30-year high. The only social mobility is downward. Millions lack health insurance, schools are failing, prison populations are swelling. American workers put in more hours than workers in any other high-income country. Employment security is a thing of the past, and wages of working people are stagnant or declining. We are here to look upstream to the cause of this disaster. And it all traces to the actions of a few Wall Street CEOs and financiers who use their political power to game the system to their advantage. They used free trade agreements to ship American jobs to foreign sweatshops so they could accumulate grand fortunes by pocketing the money that previously went to people who did the real work and created the real wealth. And what's the purpose of their accumulating all this money? To improve their scores on the Forbes list of the world's richest billionaires. To make up for the lost income that Wall Street absconded with, families were forced to borrow against the credit cards or to mortgage their homes, home equity at usurious interest rates, all to further boost Wall Street profits. So it worked for the bosses. The richest 1% of Americans now have a greater combined net worth than the entire bottom 90% of the rest of us. 1% own more than the 90%. And the gap continues to grow. Obscene inequality is undermining the bonds of family and community and the sense of shared interest needed to support public investment in essential programs and infrastructure. Wall Street bought and corrupted our politicians and governments. And then there's nature. A Wall Street cultivated addiction to endless, mindless economic growth to increase the financial fortunes of the few is disrupting Earth's climate patterns, reducing Earth's capacity to support life, and further fueling social breakdown by creating millions of environmental, political, and economic refugees uprooted from family and community and in search of a means of survival. These are all symptoms, the downstream symptoms of that larger system failure of our political and economic institutions. Now I want to say a word about the brilliance of Occupy and the 99% movement. The right action at the right time. When Wall Street collapsed in the fall of 2008, it caught most of us entirely by surprise, because so many of us had bought into the myth that Wall Street was making us all effortlessly rich. Wasn't that a great fantasy? Just give your money to Bernie Madoff. He'll take care of it all. It took a while, even after the crash, to fully grasp the extent to which Wall Street was in fact stealing us blind. Wall Street, however, boldly assured us that it was all the fault of government. That Obama president, the black guy. And if government would just eliminate the taxes and the regulations that were hamstringing Wall Street, the good times would soon roll again. Well, that old Wall Street blame the government and President Obama game was wearing a bit thin. But there was no focal point around which we could mobilize to express our frustration. Then on September 17, 2011, a small band of activists established a modest camp in New York City's Zuccotti Park near Wall Street and named themselves Occupy Wall Street. They pointed the finger at Wall Street as the culprit responsible for driving American workers into lives of devastation, and they unleashed a powerful social force that quickly swept across the nation and around the world. In a matter of months, Occupy had become a national and global brand, and inequality had become a defining political issue. The Occupy movement creates an essential space for a public conversation about what is required to replace our failed 1% Wall Street economy with a vibrant Main Street 100% economies. Some say we have no agenda because we don't have a list of specific demands. That's part of the brilliance of the Occupy movement, because it maintains the space for this conversation. And we do have an agenda. It is to replace Wall Street with Main Street.